Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. As just introduced, my name is John Winnes, and I am the Safety Program Manager at CANSO. On behalf of the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, providing more details on the Safety Culture Benchmarking Program. One of the biggest advantages of CANSO is the ability to learn from others, and today we are going to hear from subject matter experts on the program, and we're also going to hear from 3 participants' journey to benchmark and improve safety culture within their organization. At CANSO, we recognize that a strong, mature safety culture is fundamental to the performance and resilience of air navigation service providers. It's not just about compliance, it's about creating an environment where safety is continuously understood, measured, and improved. We're expected to support ANSPs in doing exactly that. Through a collaborative, data-driven approach, participating organizations will be able to benchmark their safety culture maturity against a community of peers, gaining valuable insight and identifying practical opportunities for improvement. Several ANSPs have already engaged and are beginning to benefit from shared learning, comparative data, and a clear understanding of where they stand and how they can progress. If you're looking to better measure and strengthen your organization's safety culture, today's session will give you a comprehensive overview of what the program offers, how it works, and how your ANSP can get involved. So without further ado, I'm going ahead and introduce our subject matter experts and the panelists that will be sharing with you today. So we have Ms. Andrea Sack, the Director of Safety, Security, and Quality Management at Austro Control. She's also the Vice Chair of the CANSO Safety Standing Committee. Stanley, the Chief Executive Officer of First Fruits and the Vice Chair, Strategy and Integration Standing Committee. Mr. Sabola, Human Factors Change Management Manager, Saudi Air Navigation Services. Michelle Legere, Director, Safety Management Systems and Human Performance Management at NAV Canada. And Ms. Elena Carbonell, Human Factors Expert, AirNav Ireland. And the next slide, we'll go to Andrea to kick us off with things. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'd like to start the webinar by setting the context. Across aviation and especially, of course, in air traffic management, we all operate in an environment of continuous transformation and change. Traffic isn't just growing, it's also becoming more volatile at the moment. Operations are getting more complex. And our people, our air traffic controllers, our engineers, our meteorologists, they're working in a system where they're under pressure. And we're also increasingly dealing with things like fatigue. And at the same time, we're integrating all these new technologies, automation and digital tools, which on one hand are fantastic because they just bring so many opportunities and they also simplify work. But at the same time, they also bring new types of risk, especially in the ways that humans interact with the systems. And everything's just becoming increasingly complex in that sense. And perhaps most importantly, also our workforce is changing in a lot of ways. We're seeing a lot of demographic shifts. We're seeing different expectations from a lot of the younger generations. And we're also seeing an evolution in the skill requirements that we have. And so all of this creates one fundamental change for us as ANSPs, and that's how do we maintain and especially even strengthen safety in an environment that's becoming more and more complex every year. Because we all know that these days safety, it's not just about procedures and about compliance. That's what got us to where we are today. But these days it's about how an organization thinks and also behaves and especially adapts under pressure. Slide, please. So complexity and chaos, and what's the role of safety culture in all of that? So we know on one hand that when complexity increases, you tend to see organizations go in one of two directions. So on one hand, if safety culture doesn't evolve at the same pace, it can become an amplifier of risk. So you get things like weak reporting, lack of trust in management in the organization. You get silence in the organization instead of people speaking up, which is really what we want them to do. And in that case, complexity quickly turns into a sort of an instability in your organization. But a strong safety culture, and that's what we hear about today, is exactly the opposite. Strong safety culture really acts as a sort of an anchor, which stabilizes the organization. Then we get people who speak up early. We see risks, they're surfaced, they're not hidden by people. Decisions are informed in a better way. And so from my perspective, the key message here is that safety culture really isn't a soft topic anymore. It's really a core operational capability. And especially in times of transformation, more complexity, fluctuations in traffic, it becomes the real difference between control and chaos, more or less. Next slide, please. So a strong safety culture, we said it enables change. And the reality of safety culture is that it's really what helps organizations transform and change from being compliance driven to really adaptive organizations. So here a few elements are highlighted. The first is psychological safety. So that's the about people just feeling safe to speak up, trusting their peers, trusting their managers, even when it's perhaps uncomfortable for them to do so. The second thing is reporting, open reporting. So that means as an organization, you're actually getting the data you need. You see smaller risks, you see observations from your staff, you learn about slips, and you don't just see what people feel comfortable to report and safe to report. Resilience, so that's the ability of the organization to adapt under pressure without losing control, of course. Then you have just culture, where you get a clear understanding of accountability versus learning. Then there's the trust in leadership, especially critical, of course, in times of uncertainty and transformation. And finally, the learning organization. So the mindset that incidents, they're not failures in any way, but they're opportunities to learn and improve as an organization. And if all of these elements are in place, organizations then move from being compliance driven to being adaptive organizations. And that's exactly what today's very dynamic aviation system needs. Next slide, please. So what drives successful change in an organization or in an ANSP? The question kind of becomes, how do we actively strengthen safety culture and not just talk about it? And from experience, from Austro Control, from other ANSPs, and I think even indeed across the industry, there are three key drivers to that. And the first is measured change. So there's the old saying, you can't manage what you can't measure. And I think indeed that's true in a lot of ways. You really need data-driven insights into culture and not just assumptions. And that goes beyond insights that you might get from things like incidents or investigations or even employee satisfaction surveys. It's really about having a deep understanding of the culture in your operations, in your organizations, about what's happening at the front line. The second thing is support and learning. So safety culture is obviously not developed in isolation. There is huge value in learning from peers, from benchmarking, from structured benchmarking programs. So ANSPs, although we have different national cultures that of course influence our organizational culture, we also have a very distinct safety culture. And that's where we can learn from each other and adopt things from other ANSPs and grow together. And the third thing is leadership backing. Now, this is, of course, very critical. And I think that without executive commitment, even the best insights, the best ideas won't translate into action. And it's often difficult because sometimes there's a big distance between the front line and between senior management. And that is why that is the first thing that is really an important thing to close that gap. And when these three things come together, culture becomes structured and it becomes measurable and things can improve, and most importantly, change can become sustainable. And that is exactly where the CANSO Safety Culture Program also comes in. So I'd like to hand over, please.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. And yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Safety culture is being seen as foundational to our outcomes. Andrea's mentioned there, through the complexity of change that we're now seeing, how we can respond to that in the culture of our organizations. The latest edition of the ICAO Safety Management Manual reinforces this, that it's not a nice to have. So what can we do about it? What can we do about it as the CANSO community? How can we help each other? We're really excited to launch the Safety Culture Benchmarking Program with CANSO, Austria Control, NAV Canada, and First Fruits coming together to help the industry globally find solutions to this based on data that leads to tangible change. This cannot be a tick box exercise. So this cross-industry initiative, it's designed specifically for ANSPs. It's customized for the operational environments, for the day-to-day realities that we see with air navigation service providers. It's tailored in that sense. Of course, safety culture is used wider. It's used in oil and gas, in energy, in nuclear, in rail. This has been shaped to actually fit what works within ANSPs. It enables, therefore, meaningful comparison across organizations with shared challenges. Many of you on this call, the problems you face, the things that keep you awake at night, you share. So how can we gather that data, tell the stories, and share that with each other in ways that enable us to take action? That's at the heartbeat of this benchmarking program. It allows us to have evidence-based insight. So yes, on strengths, things that are working. Let's share those best practices. Let's understand the success stories, but also the areas for improvement. Let's be open with each other within the CANSO community to be able to enable those conversations to take place. As Andrea said, it moves us from a tick box exercise from compliance to drive an engine of change. That's the heartbeat. We want to be able to collect data, test whether it's working, and create an engine of change. The next slide, please. So what's at the heartbeat of it? It's a simple process by which we can collect 16 questions across 7 demographics, only taking 2 or 3 minutes with each of the staff who fill out the survey, and pulling that together at a CANSO level to give a benchmark report. This benchmark report enables us to use these standardized questions to compare the data across different ANSPs, across multiple ANSPs, and as we develop this across regions, across peers who are similar to you in scale. The quantitative results that result from this, the 16 questions particularly, help us identify the transformation areas that we want to focus on. Now, of course, as you do these surveys, as you collect the data, you're able to use qualitative insights as well. In other words, text-based answers to questions as well. You can do more than just the 16 standardized questions. But these core questions, those 16 questions, enable you to measure different areas in your organization. It's leadership commitment. It's the climate of reporting, the mindset, the environment within which reporting can take place. It's the perception in your organizations of just culture, of the ability to report without fear of undue punitive consequence. It's the learning culture. It's how well we're using continuous improvement and learning the lessons from the safety reporting that we get. And it's understanding all of this in light of reality. It's not taking a theoretical approach. It's saying we understand that there are operational pressures. We understand that throughput, capacity are important. We understand that workforce pressures will bear on what our safety culture looks like. Let's make sure we examine this data in light of that. Let's not decouple from the reality. Next slide, please. What arises from this, what we're able to do is generate user-friendly, data-rich reports. I talked about the 16 questions across 4 quadrants. This slide shows those 4 quadrants with some dummy data. This is no one's actual data. So here we're showing ground up safety responsibility, the ability of each level of the organization from the ground right up to senior management to take the right responsibility for safety outcomes. That's one quadrant. We have employees asking questions and acting. The ability of the employees to raise their hand and raise issues with those around them, and to be able to then take action based on that. There's an element of psychological safety there, what Andrea mentioned earlier, the ability to do that in a safe environment. There's generating a feeling of healthy unease in the bottom left there. This sense that we don't accept the norms, but we are always on the lookout for risk, that we are aware of the environment around us, of the changing context, as Andrea mentioned, whether that be the traffic situation, whether it be our workforce, whether it be new technology, that we have this feeling of healthy unease, that we sense what's going on around us and we're able to respond to it. And finally, open and honest conversations about safety. It's good if we can collect the data. It's good if an individual can raise their hands. Does it lead to the right conversation, or is the conversation actually shut down for different reasons? So those 4 quadrants enable us to tell stories and ask questions that go beyond a surface level in the organization. By using the benchmarking program, it enables us to compare those 4 quadrants against peers, against others. We can even compare it a question by question layer. I mentioned demographics. What are demographics? They are categories which individual respondents answer that enable us to go a level deeper in understanding what our organization is saying. So we can look at demographics such as age, role, seniority, time in organization, and then be able to shape our answers to the questions and the benchmarking by those demographics. So for example, we can split by engineering and operations. We can split by age. And we can then do a peer-to-peer comparison within that, all done within this CANSO benchmarking program. You start to see the power of what the data is able to uncover as you look at that. So yes, you could, for example, look at how seniority impacts people's views of the maturity of safety culture in your organization. But just on its own, you may not be able to then say, well, is this good or bad? How do we actually weigh this up? By comparing the data against peers, you're then able to say, well, actually, in our organization, we see we are different here. We are distinct. Maybe there's some underlying cause there. Can we share stories with our peers to be able to uncover some of the causal factors? Maybe it's trust in management. Maybe it's a particular issue with some of the newer cohorts that are coming through. That powerful data-rich storytelling is what's at the core of the CANSO safety culture benchmarking program. Next slide, please. We can then also look at those individual demographic areas and understand the segments within those. So by joining the benchmarking program, we help in terms of the data to be collected. We give you a sense of how to order that data so that we can benchmark together. So for example, maybe you have a question of, does the age of my controllers shape their view on the maturity of the safety culture? Do my older controllers think it's better than my younger controllers? Anecdotally, I might have heard things, but actually what's going on? By using the standardized questions, internally, you can look at that. You can do that work yourselves. But then by shaping it with the benchmark data, you can make sense of the results with your peers as well. So this diagram here shows a segmented view of the organizational maturity score of safety culture. So we're able to turn those quadrants and the overall findings into scores. and then to look at the variation per segment. So for example, for those under 25, or those from 26 to age 30, or those age 31 to, and so on. So this chart is showing, again, dummy data, I stress, that those under 25 have a lower perception of the maturity of safety culture than those over 25. And it shows the variance from the mean. You're able to start to play with that data in a way that really uncovers some of the underlying factors which are influencing your safety culture. And taking Andrea's point from earlier, if safety culture is foundational for your overall safety performance and indeed your operational performance, it's this kind of data that can allow you to have the right conversations and take the right actions. As I said earlier, the demographics can include age, tenure, role, seniority. It can also include working location. So if you are a larger ANSP with multiple locations, multiple units, it can be broken down in that way as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. The point of this is that safety culture is not a silo. It's not done by the safety division, completely removed from other parts of the organization where it becomes a tick box, let's say. This enables you to interrogate core operational realities, by which I mean the day-to-day business of your organization. Now, I don't know the participants of those of you who are watching this, how many of you are operations managers or operations directors. This is as important for you as it is for those who are safety directors in the organization. Hand in hand, we can understand our culture, the norms, the behaviors of our workforce, and help shape it. It actually addresses what keeps you awake at night, the real issues. Now that might come down to how do I know that I'm safe in light of new technology, in light of changing traffic levels? How do I ensure that my ops management and my ops workforce and my senior execs are aligned in these areas? Are the messages being heard in the same way? We're able to provide data that unlocks some of these issues. So from psychological safety to trust in senior management to maybe clarity around investigation processes, just culture. How does this link to the wider organizational and operational culture that we need to be shaping in our organizations in order to deliver the performance we need and we want? Next slide. So fairly simple, 16 questions. They're on a Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree with 7 demographics. It takes people 2 or 3 minutes to respond. Why does it matter? Why do that? Why take the time to do surveys? You know, many of our organizations, the staff might be fairly demotivated by surveys at the moment. How do we link it to the benefits? Well, one thing we can do is show that we can measure culture before major change programs begin, before we are embedded in the change. We're actually able to create a baseline and show people that we care and feed back to them the issues that they're seeing. We can then monitor during the change. So whilst the benchmarking program is able to set that initial peer-to-peer comparison, we also have the capability to do time series. In other words, what's changing over time? What's changing over time for you? What's changing over time for your peers? And what does that say about how your culture is being shaped in light of the transformations that are going on in your organization and in the airspace? We can assess how those changes impact the organizational culture and the safety culture particularly. And clearly one thing that we're all wrestling with worldwide in this is how do we build trust during these transitions? How do we build trust in our workforce in ways that motivate and in ways that enable performance and safety outcomes? How do we ensure that instead of it being a top-down compliance-based process, the people in our organizations are part of the change? This data enables those kind of conversations to happen as well. I mentioned earlier, it enables an evidence-based dialogue. It is not anecdotal. It is not one or two people who maybe speak a bit louder than others. It is the workforce's voice helping to shape the next steps. It enables the conversations between management and ground level staff in helpful and evidence-driven ways. Within CANSO, we have the effectiveness of safety management and the standard of excellence published, which many of you use. Of course, this data can also feed into those. It can enable the evidence to show why you are approaching a certain level of maturity within your wider safety management, and also identify those factors which can change your ability to mature. It enables you to check with peers how they are achieving a certain level of safety management and standard of excellence, and then be able to have the right changes and the right interventions in place to make a difference to that. Next slide. So some examples of where these transitions that Andrea mentioned at the start, where you might look for culture signals and how the benchmarking program and the data that's collected can enable that. Let's imagine you have a traffic surge and a staff shortage. It's something which ANSPs globally are wrestling with at the moment. And that traffic surge, the uncertainty in the traffic, the volatility in the traffic, we're seeing more and more. It may lead to declining reporting. It may lead to people feeling they are too busy to be able to inform the organization what's going on from a safety risk point of view. Here, the survey in the quadrant ground up safety responsibility uncovers some of that. If you do pulse testing with it, it uncovers it over time. You're able to track what's going on. So, okay, we're seeing a traffic surge, we're seeing difficulties with the roster. How is it impacting our safety culture and the maturity of our safety culture and the end safety outcomes? Perhaps you're introducing a lot of new technology. Maybe there's new automation. You're hearing that the workforce is concerned about some of that, but you're not sure how to deal with that in terms of the safety outcomes. Maybe there's an increase in what we call silent skepticism, the kind of quiet but worried response to some of these changes, where people are skeptical, where people are maybe feeling that they're apathetic, that they are not able to influence the outcomes, and so they just go silent. This survey uncovers some of those feelings, both through the quantitative responses, the Likert questions, so open and honest conversations about safety, asks about some of these things, but then also maybe if you also collect data on qualitative, where people are asked their opinion and they trust the process in ways that they're not going to be held to account over stating their real feelings. And then finally, maybe you're going through organizational restructuring. Maybe there's a change in the way that you are setting your vision and the strategy within the organization, and it shapes how our workforce are organized, maybe where they're located, and maybe there's a drop in management trust indicators. How does that impact safety and the safety culture? Well, the psychological safety within the organization may suffer. And the quadrant of employees asking questions and acting, we may see a reduction. We've now got the data to say, look, it's no longer anecdotal. We're able to see how these other things impact our safety culture. They impact our risk outcomes. And therefore we can take action, informed action around those. Next slide, please. Now, this may seem slightly conceptual. It is a real privilege to have three of the people who've been walking this journey already with us today. And they're going to tell their stories from different perspectives. We're going to hear from Rochelle talking about NAV Canada's work with 3 NSPs, with 2 other ANSPs, comparing safety scores and what that looked like. We're going to hear from Elena from AirNav Ireland, talking about the safety culture journey they are on. And we're going to hear from Nuno from the Saudi Air Navigation Service, measuring safety culture across Saudi. One thing you'll see with this, 3 very different ANSPs in different parts of the globe. This is truly a global benchmarking program. So without any further ado, and to make sure we've got the time to hear from them, let me hand over to Rochelle as she talks us through NAV Canada's journey. Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle, and my team was able to participate in the first global assessment, which was great because they got to work with SkyGuide and Austro Control. And I'll tell you a little bit what we learned. Next slide, please. So what did the data reveal? It identified that all 3 organizations had a strong safety commitment, but there were also common gaps that we found in psychological safety, the consistent application of just culture, and low staffing levels, and that there were disconnects between the formal processes and the frontline experience. What's really interesting is some of the key challenges are industry-wide and not necessarily isolated. Now, that being said, if for some reason one organization scored higher than the other, that was a great opportunity for us to be able to learn from each other and say, what are you doing so right? And identifying the opportunities that you can bring home, because everyone wants to share and grow and be stronger together. Next slide, please. So what was great for us, and this is our personal experience, is that after we did the survey and after we did the benchmarking, it was really interesting to see how leadership reacted, because now it was an opportunity to say, well, this is where we are and this is where we are as compared to X or Y. And it did allow leadership to actually grab onto it and say, hey, these are our results, share them with everyone in the company. And it did end up reinforcing that responsibility and that leadership to say, hey, we want safety culture to be one of our #1 things that we work on, because safety culture is really foundational and the enabler of your safety management system. And that was something that leadership understood and was able to carry the message through. We got different departments because when we did and look at the data and we did a transection, each department was able to identify where they had their strengths and where they had their weaknesses. And every department actually even developed an action plan to say, this is how, what we're going to do to be able to enable our safety culture and advance our safety culture. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits? One of the biggest benefits that we found was the workshops where we ended up working together. So like participants from all of the ANSPs got together and got to work together. And the biggest benefit was actually having some of our frontline employees be part of the conversation. Because I feel that a lot of controllers have this perception that, well, it's only here and it's only us and everywhere else is either better or different. And what they learned was that everybody is pretty much the same. And all of the experiences that they were feeling and some of their frustrations were not only here, but were there. And they got to learn from things. So they talked about what is strong, what is wrong, what do we need, what are we willing to contribute? And it really did offer us that opportunity to have those qualitative insights, the things that you don't capture in the survey, and then learn from others, and then identify what are you going to implement in the future and where are you going to go. Next slide, please. So what has changed for us here at NAV Canada? Well, we're definitely stronger, more of a safety dialogue everywhere. So we're embedding the philosophy of safety culture within our code of business conduct. We just finished having a leadership conference with all of our leaders, and we talked about safety culture. We talked about how, hey, you may not be an operational department, but the philosophy of safety culture is good business, and you should be following all of these elements as well, because this is how you're going to increase resilience within the company and ensure that all of this transformational change is successful in the end. And we are trying to further psychological safety. Just culture is not a term that we actually understand necessarily in finance, but we try to draw the links and we try to have the part of the conversation. We're trying to align better with our policies and our practice so that work as prescribed is closer to work as done. It's not there yet. We're still working on it, but it is the direction in which we want to go. What was also very interesting, so one of our biggest challenges in Canada is that we are massive. So we have 7 flight information regions, which is akin to probably one of yours, like your whole organization. So we have like 7 of them. So we have 7 silos across the country, essentially, and every ANSP or every, well, it's like a mini ANSP. So we have like 7 mini ANSPs, and they all have a different culture. And what was interesting is we looked and identified to see which one was stronger than the others, because we had one that we were like, wow, like these guys are knocking it out of the park. How come? And we actually went and did a qualitative analysis because of these results. So we did a safety 2 analysis and we said, what is happening here? Why are you guys so great? And we're learning that. And now we're going to compare for another one to see where are their strengths and how can we have it something that we can share within our own country, so within our own organization, based on the results. So when Ben was talking about different demographics, how do you slice and dice? He's not wrong. They are the ways that you can look at things and you can identify, is there a certain demographic that's challenged? Is there an area where you can improve? But what can you learn from the people that are strong? Not just focusing on people that are challenged. Next slide, please. And when we did our analysis, this is some of the results of what we would have looked at. So you can see from the spider diagram that NAV Canada would be in blue, that is our color, and then Austro Control is in orange. And we could compare to see, but you can see how we're very, very similar across, and there's not that much for this question or these questions, because that's questions 1 to 16, and you can see how much we diverged from each other. And that's where we're able to say, hey, Austro Control, you guys are really strong in question 8. What do you do, or what did you do that made that so much better? And those are the opportunities that you can gain from participating in the benchmarking. Next slide. It is my pleasure to introduce Elena, who is amazing, from AirNav Ireland, and she's going to talk to you about her experience. Bye.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I'm not too sure how I'm going to top that, but I'm going to try. Hi, everyone. Hope you all are well. I'm Elena, and I'm the Human Factors expert at AirNav Ireland. I'm going to talk you through the journey that we've been on, and I'm saying journey because I feel like safety culture is always evolving. So can we move the slide, please? So first of all, I have to say that AirNav Ireland, we've been conducting safety culture surveys for a number of years. And what we came across throughout all these years is that they're generally very long. So when I contacted Andrea and Leah at the time, they introduced me to them and they explained how just with 16 questions, we could do a marvelous safety culture survey with them. And not only that, but also benchmark with other ANSPs that are following the same program. And that also solves one of the other issues we were having, which is, okay, we do the survey, we get our challenges and we get our strengths. What do we do with it? Who do we reach out to? And we felt that with this, it could allow us to compare results and see who to reach out, who had best practices and who could help us in our development. So the first thing we did is distribute these 16 questions plus 2 that we added, just because we felt that it could connect to the previous survey that we ran in 2022 much better. And we distributed through the software, and we got a 50% response. And that is brilliant for us, because in previous surveys, we only got between 20, and I think the biggest turnover we ever had in our history was 27%. So this was brilliant. Now, I have to warn you, though, that we did hound absolutely everyone with it. With that, I mean, we had people in the kitchens at the units going like, have you filled out the survey? Please fill out the survey. And also I have to congratulate our union because we got them involved since the beginning and they were brilliant trying to distribute it. And again, thanks to them, we also handled a lot of people trying to fill it out. And I have to say our results were very similar to NAF Canada, although a bit below in some areas. So Rachel and of course Andrea from Austro Control are hearing about us quite a bit. I'm sorry for that. And after the survey was completed, we conducted some workshops. Now, it was brilliant the fact that Austro Control and First Fruits were able to come into our units and be able to conduct these workshops. We had a few challenges from our organization point of view, just because, well, once you see the next slide, you'll see one of our main challenges is staffing. But it was great having an external organization come in, talk to them, and give feedback of what their own organizations were doing at the same time. And after the workshops were concluded, we heard really, really positive reviews from our ADCOs. If we move on to the next slide, you'll see the strengths and challenges that we came up after the survey. And I want to focus on the strengths because a lot of times we forget there are strengths and we should celebrate what we're doing well. Since we started doing safety culture at RNAF Ireland, I think it was 2015, we've had very positive outcomes. And you can see on our strength that we have strong safety commitment, a positive just culture, and the peer support that they give between each other is absolutely amazing. Now, it did highlight a few challenges that we already previously knew about, but it was good that instead of relying on lagging indicators, we could get evidence-based findings about our challenges. Now, I'm sure a lot of ANSPs will relate to this, but staffing and fatigue. And that relates into communication. Is management communicating enough on why we're doing things? Is that communication happening but not getting across as necessary? Also, I'm sure you also find it that procedures take a long, long while. And you're just swamped with documentation and you lose a lot of time, and then changes take a long time to happen. And also we are facing the challenge of an aging workforce. And by that, I mean, in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of our staff are going to retire and we don't have the people at the moment to replace them. So we discovered that we've reached a plateau on our safety culture. And when you're trying to maintain a certain level of high standards, what can happen is that it starts to slip a bit. And by that, I mean, no more big changes are possible just because we've done everything to make everything safe. So the changes that are happening are like for like. What happens, people raise issues, but because of procedures, of external factors, they cannot be implemented or have to be implemented in a really minimal way. So it's a bit of a culture of the learned helplessness. However, we're going to move forward, and thanks to the benchmarking, we know which ANSPs to reach out to. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll show you the next steps we're doing. So at the very moment, actually this week on Monday, we met up with all the different managers from the units, and we're starting to establish actions. Once we have these actions established, what we're going to do is reach out to the ANSPs that have a better procedures, better best practices, best guidances about it, and try and implement or accommodate what they have into our organization, and hopefully improve or at least maintain our safety culture at RNAF. Also, what the software really allows us to do is send pull surveys. And that means that once we've implemented an action, we can send a tiny, tiny, tiny survey to see if that action is having the desired effects or if there are any new issues that are coming up. And that's all from my side. I'm going to hand it over to Nuno, who's going to explain you the SANS journey.
Everyone. It's lovely to be here with you today. And thank you, Alana, and the previous speakers for all the information and introductions. So my name is Nuno. I work at SANS in Saudi Arabia. I've been working in human factors for the past 20 years almost. I used to work in the UK, and I've been with SANS for the past 8 months or so, helping them move forwards in the field. Next slide, please. What I really want to highlight to you is what you can do beyond the core survey. So the core survey has 16 questions, which gives you this fantastic ability to benchmark against other organizations, as we've seen. But it lets you do more than that, because you can add further questions. So for us at SANS, we had two areas that we were very keen to explore. One was voluntary reporting, and the other one was change management. And the reasons for that are that the whole Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going through significant change. So there is a big sort of government initiative to move Saudi Arabia from a oil-centered economy to one that relies on other aspects. And aviation is a big part of that, to enable all of those various initiatives and strategic targets for the kingdom. We need to upgrade aviation. So there's a lot of change in technology, procedures, ways of working that Centre is going through. So we really wanted to check how people were feeling about the amount of change, the pace of change, and the actual vision. Voluntary reporting is something that we wanted to know more about. We weren't sure if our numbers were good, if we're getting good engagement on voluntary reporting or not. And we wanted to be able to then have those conversations with our staff and perhaps explore further in terms of benchmarking. So the ability to add questions to the core survey is fantastic. And the other thing really to highlight for us is the workshops. So it's great to have the 16 questions. It's great you can look at yourself against others, but you really want to get under what those questions are saying to you. So that was something that we really valued, and the team were fantastic. And I'll show you why in the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is one of the visuals that the team produced for us. And it just sort of highlights the difference in cultures from Canada, Austria, and Saudi Arabia, and how that can influence how people relate with surveys and the types of answers that you get. And that's really key to be aware of, and it's a key functionality in the way the survey is run and the benchmarking is run. That just because the numbers may look the same or may look very different, there might be more behind it. So again, the diagnostic workshops are fundamental to try and understand why people are saying whatever they're saying in the survey, and that ability to bring that understanding to how that activity is conducted is crucial. So in the two main areas that we're concerned about, voluntary reporting, we were able to dig a bit deep and try to unpick some of the cultural aspects beyond the answers, and that gave us fantastic insight. And through the benchmark, I was able to reach out to Rochelle and ask her about their voluntary report. And you know, the numbers they see and the numbers we see are in a completely different scale. So again, it's a powerful message that I can take back into my team at SANS to say, well, we don't need to be in the same ballpark as NAV Canada, but they are doing something different from what we're doing, and they're seeing different results. And the same on management of change or any other areas that one might care to benchmark against. The ability to reach out beyond, you know, the people that you know or the teams you might have contacts with through the platform and the people that you will meet if you join the benchmarking initiative is fantastic. We've been able to reach out to multiple NSPs, get different insights, different views, and we have learned a lot way beyond what we have learned from our staff in terms of where our safety culture is. I think that's me, and I'm passing back to John, I believe.
Nuno, thank you for that. Wow, this has been It's been great. I mean, from the subject matter experts, starting with Andrea and Ben, and I really want to say thank you to those of you that have stepped up, Rochelle, uh, Anela, and Nuno, to be able to share with us that. So I really, really appreciate you sharing your experiences. And so, looking at that, how do we align with the CANSO standards of excellence? You look here at the diagram that we have shared, and it talks about the safety risk management underpinning the effective safety management systems, the human resources and people, looking at the psychological safety and leadership behaviors that affects performance, supports workforce sustainability. So again, all of these things are reasons as to why. And if we think about the CANSO standards of excellence, the CANSO Eurocontrol standards of excellence, it's really the overarching tool that we use to align with Annex 19 in order to be able to really look at the value within the organization and see where we can look at ourselves in the mirror and what are we doing. And this safety culture benchmarking program will help you do that. Looking at the leadership and governance, as you can see there, it enables evidence-based oversight during change. It provides measurable leading indicators for safety. And the corporate and strategy performance, I know we've talked about leadership. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. And the data supports for strategic decision making. The thing to kind of note here as it relates to the standards of excellence is the program is that last bullet. The program operationalizes the people dimension of the standards of excellence, turning culture into measurable performance intelligence. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about how to engage leadership. How to engage leadership. As we think about strengthening safety culture through the safety culture benchmarking program, leadership engagement is absolutely critical, especially at the executive level with ANSPs. First, leaders need to think consistently, communicate safety priorities, particularly during periods of transformation. The change can dilute focus, so executives must reinforce that safety remains non-negotiable even when operational or financial pressures increase. Second, it's about modeling the right behaviors after incidents. How leaders respond sets the tone, demonstrating learning, curiosity, and accountability rather than blame, which encourages the same mindset across the organization. Third, protecting reporting channels is essential. Under pressure, there can be a tendency to suppress or filter information. Executives must actively safeguard open reporting environments so that risks and concerns continue to surface. Another key responsibility is aligning middle management behavior with safety goals. Strategy alone isn't enough. Frontline experience is shaped by supervisors and managers, so leaders must ensure expectations, incentives, and actions are fully aligned. Finally, cultural data needs to be elevated to the board level. Safety culture insight should be treated with the same importance as financial or operational metrics, enabling informed strategic decision making. In short, the benchmarking program provides the insights, but it's leadership's action, consistency, and visibility that truly drive a strong and resilient safety culture. Next slide, please. Culture protects safety. This slide brings us to a simple but important idea. Culture protects safety, especially during change. First, the transformation without cultural insight is essentially unmanaged risk. We often focus on system structures and processes during change, but if we don't understand how people think, how they speak up, and how they behave, we're missing a critical part of the risk picture. Second, safety culture is not abstract. It's a measurable asset. Through the benchmarking program, we can quantify perceptions, behavior, and trust levels, giving us something tangible to manage and improve. Third, the benchmarking allows us to learn beyond our organizational borders. It helps us step out of our internal perspective and see what good looks like elsewhere, accelerating learning and avoiding blind spots. Again, as I mentioned whenever I opened up, that CANSO is one of the biggest benefits you can get is from learning from others. And fourth, leaders shape culture most during periods of uncertainty. When things are unclear or under pressure, people watch leadership behavior more closely than ever. What leaders say and do signals what really matters. So think of this closing thought. In stable times, procedures protect safety, but in times of change, it's culture that makes the difference. Next slide, please. And I think we will go to questions and answers. So I think that we had one question that was up. And I will go ahead and ask the audience question. It says here, some demographic information can be difficult to obtain or will make survey respondents feel that they can be identified. Do all 7 demographic questions have to be asked in order to participate in the comparison?
All right, I can take a first stab, and then maybe as others are joining us to discuss, it'd be good to hear from others. So, firstly, the underlying issue, the issue of attribution, is real. You know, so we have seen this worldwide. They see it in other sectors as well. Employees sometimes can be wary, fearful of being honest through these surveys. They don't want to be able to be identified over certain views. Various reasons for that, but some of it can come down to psychological safety. There's different approaches that then you could take. So within the benchmarking program, we would be able to obviously collect the data and then do peer-to-peer comparison. The question is how you collect the data. So you could collect it yourself. The concern there internally in organizations can be, well, maybe the people in my organization will be able to identify me. And I don't know whether I'm happy with that. You could use an independent. So plenty of ANSPs worldwide will use an independent organization, either a peer or someone else local, to be able to run the survey for them, to be able to collect the data in ways that ensure that it cannot be attributed. So for example, when we've done it in the past, you might group certain categories together, certain demographics together, to ensure that no one person can be attributed. So for example, we might group certain age ranges together. If you only have one person over 65 in your organization, they would be easily identifiable if we segmented by that. When we are looking to benchmark, that's then a slightly separate question. So do you need to collect all 7 demographics? Not to be able to benchmark, but you will get more data, obviously, and more segmented data in the benchmarks if you do collect those demographics. So you can collect a basic set, but we would definitely recommend, if you're able, to look at collecting the wider set. Anyone else want to jump in on that particular question or their experience?
I can contribute then. I think, and you know, I've been running safety culture surveys in previous organizations for the past 10 years, maybe more. What we've learned, what I've learned during that time, is that you want to segment your population in a way that is then actionable. So one of the issues that we used to have when we ran surveys at NAT, where I used to work, was that then I would go to, say, the engineering team and say, here is the results for your engineers. But the way the company was structured, it meant that those engineers were across 3 teams or 4 teams. So those specific managers were unclear which they're related to their organization and what they should do as a result of that. And I think, you know, when we did the survey a few months back at SANS, we did the same. We added some extra demographics that will allow us to then attribute actions to the right department. So I think it's finding that balance, as Ben was saying. You need to, you know, have enough to assure people that they will not be identified, but you also need to find the balance of taking enough information that you can do something with, because otherwise, you know, they have an issue with engineers. Which type of engineer, whether they sit in your organization. I think each organization will have to find its own balance.
Great. Thank you for that. And if there's nobody else that wants to respond, so I'll go to the next question. How often is the survey given?
I can take that one. So at Ostro Control, we felt that a healthy interval was like once every 3 years. But having said that, a less useful answer is, of course, it depends. It depends on the organization. I think it depends on the maturity, the number of changes that are going on, also on the results of the safety culture survey. If you have particular areas of concern, you might want to do it more often. I do know of ANSPs who do safety culture surveys every 2 years. I think that due to the 16 question set, which is very compact and very fast for air traffic controllers to complete, that it is also manageable to do it in shorter intervals. But at the same time, a really powerful tool which we'd like to use at Austrocontrol is, in fact, doing pulse checks in between safety culture surveys, so sticking to the 3-year interval, but in between asking, maybe 2 or 3 questions on areas that were of concern for us in our safety culture survey, or where we set particular measures and we want to test the effectiveness of the measures. That is something you can always do, and that sort of keeps the safety culture survey alive in between the big surveys as well. So again, it depends on your particular organization. I think there's no magical number, but I think 3 years is healthy. If anyone else wants to chime in on that.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.
I think the points in
Great.
between are the good points, right? Like you can always leverage anything to talk about safety culture. If you're doing an interview for anything, you can always find points of interest. So sorry. Thanks. Sorry, John.
No, that's great, Rochelle. Thank you very much for adding that to it. This is a kind of an open dialogue, and I think it will give the most bang for the buck to the people that are attending the webinar. In addition to the benchmarking, next question is this for anyone that wants to answer. In addition to the benchmarking, are you giving recommended actions to improve in key areas? Not everybody at once.
But
All right.
the answer is obviously yes. So we had our survey ran between sort of the end of November, the beginning of December, and the team not only did the analysis, ran the workshops, then they provided a set of recommendations against each of the points. It's part of the process. You do the analysis, you present it, and then you say, these are the areas where you could do something. Here's some ideas that we've seen work elsewhere.
I think doing the workshops, you're able to learn a little bit more about the underlying factors, like the why the scores are what they are. And then by packaging that information, you're able to give the evidence to leadership and say, like, this is what we've heard. And then it allows leadership to then be able to focus on an action plan that would be more effective. So absolutely.
And to add to that, I think it's also a great conversation, if you, for example, in fatigue risk management, see that you have an area of improvement, to go to your senior management and say, NAV Canada is doing this, and this is a best practice we've learned via the safety culture survey. That is super powerful, of course, because you have your proof of concept already.
I think it's important to say as well, it's up to you to decide how you want to do the surveying workshops and reports. So within the CANSO benchmarking program, we can bring the data together and do peer-to-peer comparisons. Yes, there's the ability to do additional things then as well, as Nuno was saying. But I think that core is there. Now, if you want to do it in-house in your own ANSP, fantastic. Crack on, run those workshops, be able to investigate that data, and then bring in maybe another ANSP and hold joint workshops. That kind of thing really, as has already been said by everyone, really brings powerful insights to the conversation. So the core is, let's make sure we can collect some standardized data and show how peer-to-peer comparison works. And then you might say, well, look, I need to run some workshops. I need to have a report that really goes into detailed analysis. Let me decide whether I do this internally or whether I get some support locally, or I get some support from CANSO and others. That's very much up to you then. I would hope as well, John, I mean, this is a point for you maybe, as this program matures, one of the visions is that we start to see these conversations mature. We start to see how organizational culture is developing with different ANSPs, and we're able to take those solutions and start to shape them for people as well. So One thing that we've been talking about recently is the fact that our operations management, those who are watch managers, unit heads, chiefs, whatever it be, they're in the middle. They have the change. They have a lot of change going on, and they've got a changing workforce as well. How can we support them?
Yes.
How can we look at best practice? How can we look at where people are really doing that well? And that kind of conversation is super interesting, super helpful. So yeah, it's the benchmarking program will do certain things as a core, and then obviously we'll be able to support as needed to make sure that this works for everyone.
Great. We had a question that came up, Ben, thank you for that. We had a question that came up that asked how many organizations are currently using the program?
You answer this question, John? You might have the latest. I don't know.
I know that we've sent out a few of the information to different organizations. I think that there was correct me if I'm wrong there, Ben, because I know that we had some people that were joined that had not finished the agreements yet, but I want to say it was 7 or so.
Yeah, I was going to say between 7 and 10, depending on how many are signing the agreement. So this is the launch.
Right.
This is the start
Right.
of the process, you know.
Exactly.
And what's been happening is people have been using some of these question sets themselves and then onboarding to be able to do the benchmarking. And so as people on board, you know, we want to make sure that everything is handled well. So, you know, the data governance is handled well according to the CANSO data governance principles that we have. You know, certainly if people make use of the tool, then ISO 27001 is applied, all these kind of things. So we're working with people at that. But yeah, I think it's between 7 and 10, depending on who's signed the agreement. But then there's a load more now who are starting to use these questions. And you know, the vision very much over the next year or two is we really bring on others and we're able to get a rich comparison, as Nuno showed. So we should probably point out, yeah, that was the kind of Erin Meyer's cultural map to be able to show the difference between national cultures. As we can do that more and more, we can generate those kind of powerful insights that say, well, this is organizational culture, this is national culture, and this is safety culture, and how they overlap and bring a richness to that conversation in ops, in engineering, in management, and so on.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Rochelle, the next question is going to be for you. You said there was a gap in consistency applying just culture. How do you know this? This is just such a difficult concept to measure.
Such a great question. If only it was in the question set for the CANSO benchmarking that was, it's actually the results of the benchmarking is what identifies that. But what's really interesting is the results of the benchmarking are your starting point. So you can look at it and you can say, hey, that's great. And then that's where you start slicing and dicing the data. And that's where you start seeing, is there an area that is more of a focus or not more of a focus? But then sometimes it's about going in and asking questions, because sometimes questions are interpreted a certain way and not necessarily the intended way. So it was our starting point to be able to look at things and to go down, but it was actually from the benchmarking questions and from doing the survey that did show that, and that's what we benchmark others against. So there's your answer.
Great, great. Thank you for that. There's been some questions here about how can people get the survey questions and how can they get more information about it. I would just strongly suggest you go to safety@canso.org. Just send an email to safety@canso.org and we will definitely get that information over to you. So just send us an email. We'll have that at the end and what that looks like. Elena, I know that Rochelle, you're going to have to jump soon, so thank you for your time. So we really, really appreciate that. But Elena, I think the next question is for you. That said, I would like to ask about the experience to implement peer-to-peer support and CISM in AirNav Ireland. So Elena, can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have a formal peer-to-peer support program in place. It's been done informally up until now. We're in the process of formalizing it, hopefully soon. But what we realized during the workshop is that when asked, could you help a colleague, or if you saw a colleague was struggling with something, could you help them? everyone was like, yes, I'd help them even before they asked. I noticed because I know all of them. And since the start of training, bye Rochelle. Since the start of training, they've been encouraged to create a team, to basically support each other in day to day. It might not even have to be because of work. It might just be external issues, personal issues. And, you know, the Irish way, go out to the golf cart and just sort it out in there. Regarding the season, we've had a program for ages. And again, when in the workshop, the issue came up, all of them that had made use of it had absolutely no complaints and all said it worked really well. And what we're doing also is complementing it with an employee assistance program, which is a helpline that absolutely everyone in the organization can access. And you can go through your phone, it's completely anonymous. And you talk to a psychologist if needed. And you just say, look, this is happening in my life. I just need to talk to someone, or they'll say, look, you need further support, please. I'll refer you back to your GP or whoever needs to take it up from there. So we find these two running consecutively really, really did help across the organization. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Elena. I appreciate that. Question here, it says, how does the survey help to convince the top management who believes that penalty will get results faster as opposed to culture transformation that usually requires years to build? That's a great question. Yeah, when you start thinking about this, I think it's a shift whenever you start looking at culture there. If something's always been done one way, I think that ultimately you have to measure where you're at in order to be able to change it. And I think that this survey helps you measure the culture to start out with. You have to see what your baseline is before you can start trying to make just random improvements. So just seeing where your culture is today before you can start trying to make improvements on it ultimately is probably going to be the key there. And I mean, it's 16 questions. It's very straightforward. All members of the organization can get engaged with it. And you can really, as Ben and as we've talked about earlier, there's different ways that you can assess it and you can break it down and really kind of see where some of your gaps are there. So how can you improve anything if you don't know where you're at to start, I guess would be my response to that question. How do you recommend integrating benchmarking outputs into existing SMS governments, such as safety action groups, management reviews, and safety performance monitoring? I think that, again, I think it goes similar to the last response I had, that, whenever you start looking at those, you need to be able to assess where you're at today to see where you're going to go. And I think that whenever you start looking at that, you can use some of the data that's provided to help give you tangible answers of where you need to make those improvements. But Andrea, did you have anything there you wanted to add?
Yes, I do. So first of all, about the question about management that believes in penalizing employees. So obviously, if you carry out a safety culture survey at an organization that very much has a blaming and penalizing culture, you're going to see that in your results. It's going to be very obvious in things like employees speaking up. And just seeing that in your results and comparing that to other ANSPs who don't have those deficits in their safety culture survey is the first conversation starter, in my opinion, right? Because you see that you're obviously doing something different. And based on that, I think that you can really have conversations with management and talk about what the differences are. And I mean, that's what the CANSO family is here for. If you realize that you have deficits in a particular area, you can reach out to the CANSO family and ask for help and ask what other ANSPs are doing. And I think that that's the strength of the safety culture survey. So also for later, for deriving safety programs and things like that, that you really have a really solid baseline from which you can plan your activities as an organization or as a safety department. And I think that in doing so, you can also measure the effectiveness of what you're doing. And that's the really powerful thing. So say you do have deficits in safety culture and employees speaking up, and then you take action and you make an effort to improve psychological safety, that's something that people are going to notice, and that's something you're going to be able to measure 2 years down the road. And I think that's the power of it.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that, Andre. I appreciate it. And so correct on that. Melanie, hey Melanie from Sky Guide. She asked a question here. She helped us get this started as well. So she's one of the founding people of this. So thank you. Melanie has a question here in regards to the just says when she talked to First Fruits a few weeks ago, she learned that a comparison on item level is not possible. But Ben, you said today it is possible. What's the current state for the comparison of the item level?
Yep, this is one of the joys of being able to develop rich data ourselves as CANSO, for CANSO, by CANSO, with all the organizations present. We can mature it rapidly, and we can find out what works, and we can be able to communicate that well. So one of the things we've been doing is looking at how we can split the data different ways, and how we can ensure that people are able to compare in different ways. So Melanie, happily to take that offline and kind of show you some of the latest of what we've been doing. I think one of the keys here is that data is important, but so is communication. And the one of the risks with some of this is that you can end up with a lot of data points. So across different demographics, across different locations, across the 16 questions and the 4 quadrants and so on. And we need to help, coming back to the previous question, we need to help shape the narrative in ways that management and those decision makers around us can engage with it well. And so one of the things we were looking at to start with is, do we do comparison on quadrant level? Because those 4 areas are actually key predicators, key causal factors towards a positive safety culture. So one of the things we started off was quadrant level. I think we are working hard at what else we can do in shaping those questions. So very happy to have a conversation offline, Melanie. But thank you for the question.
Great, thank you, Ben. And Andrea, I think this next one's going to come to you, but anyone can chime in here. It says, can you discuss the process that led to these specific 16 questions?
So the 16 questions are derived from a long history of safety culture in Europe, I would say. So it all began with the Eurocontrol question set. I think Eurocontrol initially set out, and that was like in the early 2000s, with the 64 question set, which was very much tailored to ANSPs. It was a fantastic thing at the time because, of course, that was the first time that there was really an ANSP-specific safety culture survey being developed. Those 64 questions were then later, a few years, reduced to, I think, 33 questions. So they already reduced their question set quite a bit. And then in a next step, I believe it was NATS UK, at a time when Nuno was also still at NATS, that they actually derived these 16 questions. So they said, that they want air traffic controller participation to be as great as possible. And we all know that air traffic controllers don't like answering lots of questions. And so what NATS did was that they, out of these 33 questions, took the 16 most relevant questions, and I believe tested those. And at the time, the first safety culture survey was carried out together with Sky Guide, with Melanie from Sky Guide and Leah Bink from Ostrocontrol. And they took those 16 questions and did a joint safety culture survey, so Ostrocontrol and Sky Guide, using those 16 questions. And Leah and Melanie then also did a scientific paper confirming that those 16 questions really were those that could best measure safety culture according to the 4 safety culture quadrants. So quite a history behind the questions and lots of different players.
Great. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate that. And every time I hear it, I'm just amazed that, I think that the proof is in the pudding, as they say. And I think that, the fact that they started with something so large and were able to get it to something that's tangible and usable, and the outputs show that. So I'm really, really happy to see the way that it's evolved and continues to evolve, as Ben just talked about a little bit. This is a great question. I was actually thinking about this earlier and how I could weave this in, and someone actually asked, it says, will the benchmarking program be a focus at the CANSO Global Safety Conference in Jeddah in August? Absolutely. To those of you that don't know, we were going to have the safety program in Jeddah last month. It's been postponed until August, and this webinar was going to be a follow-on to that program, or one of the sessions that we were going to have, which was going to be fairly detailed there with some of the same people that you have on the call today that were going to be sharing their experiences. And so, yes, it will definitely be a part of the safety program in Jeddah at the end of June. So please, we encourage everyone that can make it to come out and see beautiful Jeddah and meet the wonderful people there. So I look forward to seeing everybody in Jeddah at the end of August. What is the minimum response quality that makes benchmarking results reliable enough for management action?
Yep, I can take that one. So within each survey that you carry out, of course, there's a certain statistical significance that you can apply. And yeah, we can, yeah, so those ones that we support, we are able to calculate that from a mathematical point of view, but then there's also the segmentation within that as well. And so it's looking at it more logically in the sense of your own organization, and checking that for each segment that you wish to comment upon, you've got the right engagement. I think one of the things we'd recommend is up front, when conducting these surveys, whether you do it yourself, whether you get someone else to do it independently, have a think about how you engage people in it. I think we've seen quite a variety of response rates, but we are getting much better, I think, as an industry at understanding how to drive those response rates well across the organization. And certainly for the people that have been talking today, there's been some excellent engagement. Now that can be that we use things like QR codes so people can scan on their mobiles and can then engage with the survey there straight away, 2 to 3 minutes, ops within the workroom. It can be that we think about using multiple languages within the survey, particularly with non-ACCOs, and particularly when we've got a distributed workforce across the country. They may not be all, ICAO 4 or ICAO 6. Actually having the capability to ask the questions in the heart language, wherever you are, can be really powerful. It's something that we did with Saudi, where we asked the questions in Arabic and English, and those questions that Nuno talked about being more qualitative in nature, voluntary reporting and change management, we received, 1,200 responses in a mix of Arabic and English, and we're then able to do the segmentation by role, by age, by location, for those qualitative questions, as well as the core CANSO questions. So really powerful. So yeah, statistical significance, you can do a mathematical calculation, but do check the segments that you're looking to get stories and insights on to make sure it applies to them as well.
Yeah, great there. I think we might have time for maybe one more question or so here. I know that we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to ask this, and I think this is a great question. It says, is the benchmarking compatible with all areas of aviation, for example, airlines, ATC, ATSEP, and so on? So I know that prior to getting this program up, and I'll kick it over to Andrea or Ben, or actually anybody on the call, I think could answer this, especially those that have taken it already. But I know that we did reach out to IATA and ACI and some other organizations that deal in other industries, and they do have some similar programs. And I know that we have some of those people on this call today. And I think that there are some similarities. I had a call with one of those organizations just a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the similarities between it. But Andrea or Ben, do you want to answer that one before I close it? Go into the closing.
I'll start, and then I'll pass over to Ben, because I know he's also excited about this. So I am convinced that the 16 questions are just as applicable to airlines as they are to other other parts of the aviation industry, because the questions are not really that ANSP specific, they're safety culture specific, they're aviation specific, but not necessarily ANSP specific. Something which we would really like to do at Austrocontrol is do a joint safety culture survey with an airline next year and really get the airline perspective on board. Because we really believe that it'd be super powerful to compare safety culture at airlines and at ANSPs. Like if we were doing that, then we're really talking about the whole aviation system, and that's what really would make that absolutely amazing. But that's something we still have to find out and something we're working on. So yes, we would definitely like to do that. And if there's ANSPs out there who have good relationships to their local carriers, we highly encourage that you do that as well. And I think that we can learn a lot from each other.
It's a really logical step, isn't it? I mean, we already have runway hotspot teams, for example, where we bring together different stakeholders to identify safety occurrence and reporting. This is doing the same, but checking the mindsets of all the people that work together to deliver those safe outcomes, and being able to hopefully look at common factors in maybe national culture, organizational culture, as Andrea was just saying. In organizational culture, the way we're organized between airlines and ANSPs, there are some really high degree of similarity with operations management, with the operational workforce running safety critical services 24/7. What does that then look like? And how can we compare notes? The peer-to-peer comparison just goes up a level, doesn't it, in terms of what we're able to get out of that. So yeah, anyone on the call that's either done that or thinking of doing that, please get in touch, safety@canso.org, because we're having those kind of conversations as we seek to mature this.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Andrea. And with that, in interest of everyone's time, we will go into the closing remarks. So thank you for your questions. Thank all of you today for taking the time to join us from around the globe, regardless of where you are. And we know everyone has a busy day. Thank you to the panelists for sharing their knowledge and to those that ask questions. And most importantly, to all of you that are going to reach out to us here at CANSO at safety@canso.org to take the next step. I hope this session has given you a clear understanding of the Safety Culture Benchmarking Program and how it can support your organization in strengthening and maturing your safety culture. At CANSO, we believe that collaboration and shared insights are keys to advancing aviation safety across the global aviation community. And this program is designed not just as a tool, but as a platform for learning, comparison, and continuous improvement among your peers. For those of you that are interested, as Ben just said, please reach out to safety@canso.org, and we will get you the information that you need. If you have further questions following today's webinar, you can also reach out to us there as well. Thank you again for your time and engagement, and we look forward to working with you.